Hello, everyone. Welcome to my Facebook Live today, which will be about prepping your script for the punch-up process. My name is Daniela Saioni. Many of you probably have already trained with me. I am a film and television comedy writing teacher and comedy writer, and I just want to share with you this. This was the award I just won last weekend. I won two, actually, Best Screenplay and Best Fresh Voice at the Female Live Film Festival. I'm really super proud of this because I worked really hard on that script, as I always do. But I was so happy to get words and feedback from the judges like masterful, script, timely, this has to get made. These are the words you want to hear from your scripts. It wasn't even in my usual style. I was hired to write this script. But you know, the thing that I'm very proud of is I teach you guys the exact same process I use to write my scripts. I don't hold back on any of that. So if I can do it, you can do it. You can totally do it. Many of my students are working, a lot of them are working in writing rooms in Canada and beyond. And I'm so super proud of them. I also, in addition to teaching, I also am a script consultant and I am a punch-up artist that began in my stand-up comedy days, but it continues now that I'm more full-timey a screenwriter. And I am doing this because sometimes people bring me their scripts for punch-up and they're not ready. They're just not ready for the punch-up stage. So this is in part a public service announcement and in part a way to convey to you what any punch-up artist is looking for when you bring them a script to punch up. And also just a way to introduce you to me if you're not familiar with me. God, my hair is like super messy this morning. Sorry about that, guys. I'm really not a morning person, but I love doing the writing sessions that I teach in the morning. So I like keeping the Facebook Lives morning-y, because you're, sorry, it's really bright here too. I'm in Toronto. Some of you are in LA and New York, I know. It's not this snowy, but there's a lot of snow and it's casting a lot of light. Let me try to aim more for the corner. Not working. Oh well, sorry. Blown out background. Hopefully the information will be fine anyway. So yes, prepping your script for punch-up. So when you, a bunch of people did ask me the question, what is punch-up? What are you talking about? Comedy writers know about punch-up, but if you have never been through this process before, you might not be aware. Punch-up is the last stage in the comedy screenwriting process. Basically, the way I train my students, and most people train their students, is you don't start out trying to be funny. If you start out writing a comedy script expecting yourself to be hilarious all the way through, you're probably going to fail. I mean, some of you are naturally so hilarious that everything that comes out of your mouth and onto your keyboard is gold. Okay, I get it. But most of us are not like that. Most of us have to start differently, start our process really aiming for an organically written screenplay, a screenplay that is intact and is solid from a structural point of view, from a character point of view, before we ever veer into the direction of jokes and making it funnier. So punch-up is the very last stage in the screenwriting process. Often you hire other people to punch up your scripts. Even as comedy writers, we do, as comedians, we will hire, I mean, you heard the stories, Chris Rock hiring his friends to come in and punch up his scripts. That's how it works. As comics, we appreciate the different eyes and voices on our work. It's like when you're a filmmaker and you appreciate the editor's vision of how to cut it together because they may see something that you haven't seen before. And punch-up artists work in different ways. Like you might work in different ways with your punch-up artist as a writer. You may have never hired one before. So this is a public service announcement for you. Just know that you may be a great writer and there's no pressure on you to actually be hilarious. If you're not a joke writer, you can hire punch-up artists. Punch-up artists are normally not credited as writers on the work, unfortunately, but it's quite normal practice that the writer is the person credited with the script, and there might be other voices punching up the jokes. There usually are. I've seen it. It always happens in television, of course. And in TV, what you should understand is that TV is written by committee in many ways. Much of the process involves a team of writers, 6 to 12 writers. We hear of Chuck Lorre's shows employing 20 to 40 writers in a writing room, but only 1 or 2 people may get credited with the actual screenplay. That's because they're responsible for the majority of structuring it and of introducing new characters on a TV show. Characters have already been established usually. But there's a whole team of other people with other specializations in that writing room, and some of those people are comedy writers who specifically punch up. They just add jokes, make it funnier. My hair is hilarious, sorry guys. They add jokes and make it funnier. Basically, the goal of punch up is usually to increase the laugh count of your script, right? So, but the reason that you get the credit as the writer is because you've done a hell of a lot of hard work to get to the script to the point where you can now increase the laugh count. So I want you to rest easy knowing that if you hire punch-up artists, they're not going to take away from what you've done as a writer. In fact, you're going to have to answer a lot of questions for them and have the script to a point where it's so ready. It's really just about the fine-tuning in the punch-up stage. It's a very effective process for many reasons, because usually you're bringing in people who specialize. Like, you can't expect yourself to be a specialist at every aspect of screenwriting right out of the gate. Now, I train screenwriters in all of these aspects, in punch-up, in structure, in writing comedic scenes, and all of that. So I have to have knowledge of all the areas, but I myself as a writer, for example, started off strong in structure and in dialogue, but not necessarily in the in-depth character work or on a conceptual level. Like, I have friends who are much better at coming up with concepts that are, and writing partners that are much better at coming up with concepts that will blow your mind. I'm more the person that you come to when you want to bring it to life, or when you want to do a solid dialogue edit. I know my strengths. You might be still discovering your strengths, and we're all going to have strengths and weaknesses. Punch-up is really fun. It's a really important and magical stage of the process, because it's when you really get to have fun and you really just get to put your comedic brain on and let the jokes fly. But I want you guys to know that if you're writing a comedy screenplay, to not put the pressure on yourself to start there. In fact, go the other way. Try really hard to not be funny and try really hard to be real. Once you're coming to your punch-up artist, to hire, whether you hire one person or a group, and I'll talk about some different techniques people have used in employing their punch-up artists. There's different, there's information you have to provide to them, and you'll learn from them. You'll really start to see your project with fresh eyes. So generally, punch-up is that final stage in writing where the jokes are added, or the jokes are improved, or the laugh count is upped. But for myself, I have even a more loftier goal as a writer. When I get to the punch-up stage, I not only want there to be more laughs, I want them to come organically from the story that I've set up and the characters and the world I've set up. Just as not every screenwriter is a joke writer, not every comic is a screenwriter. So you have to understand that when you're hiring punch-up artists, they might be really good at joke writing, but they're not screenwriters necessarily. Some of them might be. So they might not understand, they'll understand what's funny, but they might not understand what is organic to the world you have created. So that's why this level of communication has to exist when you prepare your script for a punch-up artist, because you can't count on the fact that they're going to understand your characters or your world necessarily from one reading of the script, which usually is what you get before you start punching it up. You either take it home and read it, or you see a live read, or you read it live in the room with all the punch-up artists there. I learned this the hard way, because on a comedy script I co-wrote with Annie Bradley years ago, we decided we were going to experiment and hire 8 of our favorite comics to get in one room and punch it up. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't pay them a lot, but it was our first time, it was their first time. And what we learned was, you can hire as many punch-up artists as you want. If they don't have a clear understanding of the story and of the world you're creating and of your sense of humor and the tone you're going for, you're not going to get a high joke count from that punch-up session. For example, we spent something like $2,000 that day on hiring all those artists and feeding them and booking the room. and we got 2 jokes out of it, and they weren't even close to the best jokes in the movie. So we learned the hard way. So what I'm conveying to you is a PSA: if you are a punch-up artist in a comic, or if you are someone hiring punch-up artists in comics, you can hire the funniest people in the world, and they won't necessarily be great at punch-up. Some of them will naturally. We found one natural in the group that was awesome. We just learned we needed to communicate better, better as a team, as a writing team. Okay, so now we know what it is. We know what I'm going for as a, I think it's the difference between a good comedy script and a great comedy script. A good comedy script, of course, makes you laugh, but a great comedy script makes you laugh because you are in the story, you believe these characters, you're with them on the whole ride, and every joke feels organic, and every gag, or you know, because jokes are not only written like jokes on the page, it can be visual gags, audio gags, it's cinema, it's television. We have so many ways of evoking laughter. So sorry about all this bright weather. I guess I shouldn't be sorry that it's really sunny today, so that's good. All right, so how do you, I'll go through a few points, but we'll start with hiring the right punch-up artist for your project. You may have never hired a punch-up artist. Okay, this is why my mom always tells me to comb my hair, because it's just never, this is really freaky, seeing yourself as you talk. If you've never hired a punch-up artist, the way to go about it is you probably have seen comedians in clubs, either stand-ups or improvisers. They are brilliant, of course, at finding the joke and making people laugh. So you want to start there. Toronto, where I am right now, and LA and New York, where some of you are right now, have vibrant comedy scenes. If you can't afford like the top, you know, comics that you see on TV, you can walk into a club and see some really great comics who might be writing in the tone of your movie, the voice that you want to evoke. So you might go to them and approach them and ask them, you know, people will charge really different rates for this, and you know, you can be honest and say, this is what I have. Wow, guys, my hair has a mind of its own. And so you can talk to them after the show and engage them that way. Some comedians have websites where you can find them, and you either want to read stuff they've done or have a meeting. You definitely want to have a meeting with them for sure, if you can, or you might just know that they're right for your project. You might hire 1, 2, 3, 4. I wouldn't suggest more than 4 people punching up your script, actually. Like I said, we heard 8 and it just didn't work. You might decide to go with like your 4 main characters and have people punch up individual characters, or you might decide to have one person or a few people punch up your entire script as a whole. You know, if you read about the processes of some of the great comedic filmmakers, like I'm talking, you know, Judd Apatow, Paul Feig, Adam McKay, and there are many others. They're just the first that come to mind because they are relentless in their pursuit of the joke. Having worked with Paul on set, I can tell you there is never a moment where he's not looking to make it funnier. And I worked with him on a psychological thriller, and he's like, I'm directing this like a comedy, which he did. There was a lot of improv and punch up. By the way, the punch up I am talking with you about right now is the punch up at the script development stage, so before you go to camera. But you should also understand that punch up happens all the way across the life of a project until it's released. So after you get hired to punch up a script at the development stage, when you're on set, the director is probably is armed with the alts that you've written. And when I say alts, I mean alternate jokes. You usually don't go into a comedy with just one version of a joke in key scenes. You usually have many variations of pin this down. You actually have many variations. You might have 5 alternate jokes ready to like give the actors, and good comedic actors are ready to like sell and deliver those on the fly. But sometimes, and many times, the actor will come up with alts. Other crew members will come up with alts. Even when I script supervise, I'm coming up with alts. I've got some alts coming up in a movie that's being released next year. Called Work It. I'm told, the director told me some of my alts made it, so we'll see. But yeah, there's, you know, basically comics go in with the idea that the best idea wins. It's not about ego. It's about what works, what gets the biggest laugh. And it's usually the joke that is grounded in the character's want, need, flaw, and symptoms of the flaw. That's all stuff I teach, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but that's not what this is about. When the jokes are grounded in the reality of the script and what the script is trying to accomplish, usually that's when the magic happens comedically. So yeah, you might hire people to punch up specific characters or the whole script. You can. And you might have them working separately at home with the script. Ideally, what I like to do on either side of the table, whether I'm punching up or whether I am hiring the punch-up artist, I would have them all have the initial meeting, which I'll talk to you about in a bit, what happens at that meeting. Then I would have them take home the script and read it. If they have any questions, they can come in on the day and ask me the questions or ask the writers the questions at that point. And then we do a live punch-up session in the room with all the comics present. If it's one person and the writer, if it's 3 people and the writer, and we're usually punching it up live. We usually read each scene out loud, and then punch up the jokes within that scene, and then move on to the next scene. That's just the way I like to work. It's not the only way to work. There's so many ways to work. I've heard of comedians taking the script home, punching up the whole script, delivering it to the writer, barely having met them. That's also doable if you know that the comic is going to deliver and the comic knows that they're on board with like the world of the script. That's totally cool. So those are things to think about. And so when you hire someone, so let's say you're doing Booksmart and you're like, okay, this is a film about 2 teenage girls. I want to hire 2 teenage girl comics. That might be one way to go with the punch up, because let's face it, teenagers have their own language. I've been working as a script supervisor. I've script supervised 3 features this year, and I've had to look some of the words up. Like I thought they were typos. Like there were words like brazy and like other words that I thought were typos. They're real words, guys. That's what the kids are doing these days. So if you're speaking, or if you're speaking, if you're doing a comedy about lawyers, you want to possibly have a comic who's a lawyer, who's been a lawyer. There's quite a few of those involved in your punch-up. So think about things like that when you're selecting your punch-up artist. Think about your budget and like what you can afford and realistically, and make it worth it to them, because it's probably going to be at least a day of work, to read the script, deliver the jokes. Sometimes you can get it all done in a few hours, but you really want them to read the script and have this meeting with you to talk about what you're trying to go for, and that way you'll have a much higher potential to get the jokes that you that will help your script, that will give you maximum comedic potential. In my classes, I like to train comedy writers and writers just to create the circumstances in the script that will lead to that maximum comedic potential. So what I mean by that is, before you even get to this stage of going to your punch-up artist, you want to make sure your script is ready for punch-up. So ready for punch-up for me means, you've got a concept that is clear, and it's got legs. So if it's a TV show, you want to make sure it's got legs for an entire series. It's got an engine, is what we call a comedy engine, and you want to be able to articulate that engine to your punch-up artist and your comedy writing team. If it's a feature film, and by the way, feature films are more and more now not only in demand, but also using punch-up artists at some stage. So it used to be that 1 person or 2 people wrote a feature film, and maybe someone was hired to rewrite it. But it began, I think, more recently in the newer stage of writing with all these big action movies where they wanted more jokes in them. So they would hire teams of comedy writing rooms for like the Marvel films to give them a higher joke count. Having worked on Shazam, all the punch-up happened on set for that. So the writer did a lot of his own punch-up work. He didn't, I think I asked him even directly. I asked Henry if he had any writers punching up, and he didn't, but you had these great actors who, Zach, who played Shazam, is a comedic actor, so he did a lot of his own punch-up work. Doesn't mean everything got in, but he had a number of improvs, and so did the kid, Jack, the kid playing the sidekick. They were the 2 strongest improvisers, so they were punching up on set on the fly, which is, it can be allowed and it can be done to great effect if the actor knows what they're doing, if they're comedic actors. So I believe Zach might have even been a stand-up. He was in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, not as a stand-up, but he's really, really funny in real life. Some actors are, and then some actors will have to rein in and go, okay, those improvs really are not working. So that's when you get to production. We're still talking about script development. Okay. So yes, I just want to make sure I haven't skipped anything. Yes. So when is a script ready for punch up? So yes. So if you take my courses, and most of you watching this program right now have taken my courses, and if you haven't, just to give you an insight, I train people to get their script to this level, and then once everybody submits their script, whether it's a feature or a pilot, I pick the best 1 to 3, and we do a live read-through in front of an audience. And before we do that live read-through, I do some degree of punch-up work with the artist, with the writer, some degree of notes and punch-ups, so they get to write another draft. And then once the script is read out loud, very important part of the process, reading your script out loud, we hear what the audience laughs at, and the writer marks which jokes worked, meaning we'll put a star beside where people laughed, which is what we do at the read-through stage in film and television. And they decide whether they need that joke to be punched up, or whether they need a joke, whether the joke they have there is a miss altogether, so they have to, so sometimes you do punch up after that read through stage, and sometimes you do it before, and sometimes you do it multiple times. So that's just something to be aware of. You really want to read your script out loud, usually in a punch up session like the thing I'm talking about, where you hire a few comics and you put them together in a room. You read the script out loud together, scene by scene, so you can really hear how it's playing out loud. Very, very important in film and comedy in general. And so the things that you're looking for, as the things that I'm looking for as a punch-up artist before I even agree, not only because I also work as a script consultant and a story editor, so when I take on, because time is super limited for me, so I can't take on every project that everyone brings to me. And nor should you as an artist. You should, as a comedian, you probably want to work on projects that are in line with what your voice is as an artist. Although, this script, this was a bit of a stretch for me because I don't usually do magic realism. It was a magic realism script. Oh yeah, let me talk about a little bit about how that writer or that director hired me to write it, because that was an interesting situation. That was a feature film about a Syrian stand-up comic who becomes a refugee. Now, when he brought the concept to me, which I loved, there's way more to that concept, I just can't summarize it succinctly for our purposes, but I said, Maz, I'm a Syrian refugee. I'm an immigrant. I'm an Italian immigrant. I can come at it from that perspective. And he said, Daniela, I'm the filmmaker. I am a Kurdish. I'm not Syrian, but I'm Kurdish. The character is Kurdish. I'm hiring you because you're a comic and because you're a woman who understands love. And I stopped and I went, okay, I can come at the script from that perspective, and knowing that, the Kurdish refugee, if I have any questions about that, I would just ask Maz about it, because he lived through that. He lived through war. He lived through that experience. So I had a ready resource. I didn't have to say, okay, but I feel uncomfortable tackling that subject matter when I didn't live it. And of course, you don't have to live every single subject matter you tackle, but you want to hire. I wanted to give him the best possible shot at having an authentic script that was also entertaining. And he reassured me, this is why I'm hiring you. So when you're hiring your punch-up artist, you want to have clear reasons for bringing them on board, so that even the artist, so I can even understand as an artist, as the person who's going to, what you want from me and what I'm there for. So knowing that this was going to be a light script about a Syrian refugee going through there's a lot of stuff this guy goes through in America, and that it was a political satire of America, I could bring my insights and my experience to that, and I could really have a clear way into that script. So you got to do the same with your scripts when you're hiring anyone, when you're hiring your director, when you're hiring other writers or story editors, your punch-up artists. You have to have a clear way, a clear reasoning as to why you're bringing them on board. It'll just give you the maximum potential for success, is what I'm trying to say. So yes, in my classes, we do talk about starting with a concept that has the potential for comedy. So when people express their concepts in our class, they're not supposed to be funny like the way they're written. A hilarious romp through, no. It's this is a comedy set in the world of temps in Greece. I don't know, I'm just making that up. But it's just a very basic conceptual statement. In the interview, when I'm meeting with the writer who's hiring me, or the producer who's hiring me to punch up the script, or the director, I'm asking them to give me a sense of their basic concept, and the concept itself is either conveyed to me in like in the form of a log line, or they'll hand me a synopsis, or they'll even give me their one page if it's available. But as long as they can give me a clear understanding of what the film is about or the TV script is about, and if it's a TV series, what is the engine of the show, then that's a good start for me. Whether or not they have a one page. In that meeting, and by the way, this meeting that you're going to have with your punch-up artists is probably going to last up to half an hour. That's all it should take. I usually do it on Skype, or if they're out of town, or in person. If they're here, it's great to meet in person. I ask we should ask each other, the writer and the punch-up artist should ask each other what their comedic sensibilities are. Whether or not they're familiar with the artist's work, what do they watch? So, you know, when people come to me, it's because they have a strong female character usually, unlike the one I just did, which eventually had some strong female characters, but it didn't start that way. Or they, you know, it's probably R-rated. I do a lot of raunchy comedy, I'm not going to lie. But when people, you know, come at me with a children's thing, I'm like, it's really not my wheelhouse. Just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I can write clean comedy. I mean, I can write clean comedy. I just don't generally write to children. I do a lot of, but you know, there's plenty of amazing writers who do. I have a lot of children's writers in my classes who are incredible. They write for animation. It's a whole different skill set. It's a different perspective, you know, and so hopefully you're not coming to me for your children's show, but you know, you're doing a raunchy comedy, I'm your girl. Anyway, I digressed. So, so yes, we're talking about in that meeting our comedy sensibilities, what we watch, and then obviously the very specific sensibility of the show that you are punching up. So what is that? You know, you can give me a tonal reference. You can say, well, you know, it's like Fleabag, or you can say it's like Friends, or you can give me some idea of the tone you're going for. Tone is a huge thing, especially in television, but you know, you want to. I worked on a show called Suits for like 4 seasons, and the writers kept telling me they have this very specific tonal. If you watch Suits, you'll know it's really light and fluffy. Very well written, light and fluffy, very funny and entertaining, and also dramatic. But it was its own thing. It was like the dramedy. So the writers would say to me, "We have this like target on the wall, and the directors and the writers and the actors and everyone on board has to hit that mark." Hit that mark in the center with an arrow, or they're going to miss the tone of the show. So that's what we mean when we're talking about tone. So you need some kind of tonal reference. Like, I don't know, do you like the comedy of Jerry Lewis or, you know, Maria Bamford? Or do you like, you know, what are you going, and what do you like? That's what you like, and what are you going for with this project? You need to communicate that information to your punch-up artists, so they're not coming at you with like really shticky jokes, or maybe the tone is really shticky jokes, and that's okay too. But you got to communicate that, so the artist knows what they're going for, what you're going for, and they can have some sense if they can deliver that for you or not. Okay, what else gets talked about in that interview? You want to cover, yeah, so some of the things I teach, which many of you know because you've taken my classes, are like the character design, right? So as a punch-up artist, I'm going to ask you about your character's want, need, flaw, and symptoms of the flaw. And, you know, other punch-up artists might phrase it in a different way, but they're asking you the same thing. What are the basic things that make up this character in a shorthand that I can lock into and really get about this character? Some of the writers at that point will hand me a character description, a list of character descriptions of a paragraph each. And if those character descriptions don't include want, need, flaw, and symptoms of the flaw, I'm going to grill the writer about it, and I'm going to try to get to the heart of that to understand what they're going for. That way, when I write jokes, they're not what we call joke jokes. Joke jokes seem to land from the sky and have no bearing on what script is in hand. It's like someone's got a set of jokes in their pocket and they're bringing them to a punch-up session. That's not the craft of punch-up. The craft of punch-up is learning, you know, the given circumstances, the situation at hand and the character at hand, and then writing jokes from that place, writing a natural progression of what that character in that situation would say or do. That is hilarious, hopefully. Yes, and you want alts. You want like 5 to 10 versions of, especially in the important scenes, the big jokes at hand, so you can decide what are the best ideas. You might take 2 or 3 to the actor, you might take more. By the way, we didn't talk about sitcoms because they're very, we live in Toronto, I live in Toronto, some of you are in LA right now, but in LA, and once in Toronto, we did have a sitcom here that ran called, I'm blanking on the name, it was that hockey sitcom, anyway, they would hire writers, they would hire comedians du jour. They would hire like 5 to 10 comics du jour. I can't remember how many. There was a pit of comics. I went to a live taping to watch some work where they would be writing, punching up jokes on the fly as they were rolling. Then the head writer would go to the comics, and they paid them something like $300 flat a day to be at the live taping. So they didn't necessarily know the show. They weren't necessarily from the writing room. Usually they were guests, and they would just hand the head writer like their ideas for jokes. The head writer would look at them all, pick 2 or 3, and get the actor to deliver different takes with different jokes. So that is done a lot, and that is in live to tape sitcom, which is mostly in LA. Very rarely we get it in Toronto. I don't know about New York. I think New York is very similar to Toronto. We're East Coast vibe. We do single camera television. It's what we do. So that tends to not be the case. But yeah, I just wanted you to be aware that's another iteration of what the punch-up job can be. So you got to think on your feet. You got to be fast and on the fly. But ideally, you're giving those writers. I don't know if they did on this show that I cannot remember because I'm over 40 and I've lost my nouns. That is. Hopefully they're getting some document that is explaining the world of the show and who the characters are. Some of you in the audience may have, someone named Victor Solomon just said, say my name. Hi, Victor Solomon. I don't know who you are, but I've said your name. Say my name, say my name. Okay, and then what is your script about on a thematic or subtextual level? You need to answer that for the punch-up artist. Because they want to know what the joke is. We're looking for what the joke is in any given scene. So what we need to know, really good writing is about the subtext, right? So there's what's the scene about on a plot level, but then there's what's the scene about, Is it about 2 people falling in love? Is it about someone like trying to resist telling someone something that they need to tell them? What is the scene about? The writer needs to, the punch-up artist should have that information. I mean, hopefully it will be somewhat clear from the writing, but it's not always clear. And you just want to be able to arm them with that information because then they can give you the best joke possible in a specific scene. So what is, and by the way, when a writer who's hiring me to punch up their script can't answer questions like that, that is a little bit of a red flag for me. I'm not going to lie, especially as a story consultant. If people can't answer the question of what is their script really about, then I am going to think twice about maybe working on that script. Because let's face it, punch-up artists are great, but we're not magic. We can't fix a script that is not yet. Like I have a boyfriend who is a composer, and he likened it to composing, like to orchestrating a piece. He can't write that killer flute solo until he's written the basic melody and knows what key they're in, right? So the key they're in is like the tone, and like writing the melody and all is all the structural framework that you've set up for your characters and your story. You can't have that killer solo without having the basics down first. So just be aware of that. And yeah, and then finally, in that punch-up session, in that punch-up consultation session, I will ask, what is your goal? What are you looking for from me as an end goal? Do you want like 10 jokes per scene? Do you want me to just punch up one character? So you talk about what is expected of you, and that way you know whether you can deliver that. And then finally, of course, you're going to set up a payment schedule. Usually you get paid half up front and half on delivery, but you guys work that out ahead of time before any writing is done, just so there's no bad blood or bad juju. Just get that all sorted, and it's often not a lot of money with indie filmmakers, and it's more money with more established filmmakers. On what I didn't say earlier was on Work It, which is the Netflix feature I just script supervised it this summer. They had the script written, and the director rewrote it, and it was actually great pass on the script, very funny. But they still hired 5 comics in the head office in LA to punch it up beyond that, beyond her great script. And they didn't necessarily use all their jokes, but all the alts came to us on set. So I had a document of alts every day. These are the alts for the scene, and the director and producers would decide if they were going to use any of them or which ones they were going to try out. And, you know, she would turn to some of the crew like me and say, alts, alts, alts. It was, I love that. When the director goes, alts, 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 I'm there, because it's just really good practice for me. But yeah, that's not necessarily work you want to do for free. I just knew this I just had a few jokes in there. It wasn't a big deal. It was just really fun. Okay, so that's my public service announcement on how to get your script ready for Punch Up, and how to interview your Punch Up artist, and maybe some clear expectations on what to deliver. Oh my, that's my phone dinging. That's okay. What I would like to say is, I have all this written out in an article. If you want to email me and to get that article, you can. If you want to email me to talk about script consulting or Punch Up, you can. If you want to email me about my upcoming courses in Toronto, you can. I will be developing, I do teach a Punch Up class, which I am developing as an online class, and that'll be ready by March. So if you're interested in that, just please email me. So my email is mondocinema@gmail.com. Mondocinema is mondocinema@gmail.com. I'm Daniela Saioni. My next feature writing class in Toronto is happening at the Alumni Theatre on January 4th and 5th, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's a 2-day intensive. If you can make that class and want to write a script where I'm doing an online writer's room. So anyone who gets in my writer's rooms has to take the lectures first. And I'm sorry that if you live in LA, that's not going to be, unless I can figure out a way to Skype you in, it's not going to be possible for the January 4th and 5th class. It's already, the writer's room is already half full for that. The writer's room portion of that class, I will only take no more than 8 writers. And what we do is we work through your script. It's the 4 sessions online, and we work through it collectively as if we were in a writing room. I'll give you notes as you go along, and every week you come back with your script at a different stage. And hopefully by the end of the month, you have a full outline, or hopefully you're on your way to your first draft. And then you have another month to finish it and send it to me. And then afterwards, the best one or two, because it's feature films, we'll put on a class show with actors in Toronto, probably at the Alumni Theatre, if I can get them with a live audience. And many of my writers have gone on from their live reads to get agents and get work. So I'm really proud of that whole system. But if you just want to learn how to do it yourself, take my 2-day class. It's only $200 Canadian. That's right. So sometimes people fly in to take my classes. It's actually cheaper than taking a class in your city. It's cheaper to fly in, have a holiday in Toronto, learn about comedy writing, and then go back. I do that one for the feature class because it's funny. My TV writing classes are double that money. They're $400 and plus the writer's room. The feature writing class is $200. The writer's room is $300. But it's I've had to really reintroduce the idea that people are buying features. Nobody believes me, but I've just worked on 3 features for Netflix as a script supervisor this year, and they are looking for features. They're looking for features that are under 15 million. Which is a lot of the comedy features that we write. Many of us are not writing spy like Paul Feig, who are, with huge action scenes. We're writing relationship comedies. So I just want you to know that it is a thing that is in demand, and that's why I'm teaching feature comedy writing again after so many years of teaching television. I will be teaching the TV writing class again in April. There's a writer's room for my TV writing class in January for those who have already taken it in the past, because many people come back and do writer's room. Anyway, all of that, it's all on the Mondo Facebook page below this video. Email me, mondocinema@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Email me if you want the notes. I have the notes, of course, because I'm a nerd. I have notes on everything. And enjoy your Sunday.